Roll call, please.
Anchor?
Here.
Earl?
Here.
Keo? Meek? Myers?
Here. I should note that Commissioner Meek is excused for having notified us previously. Are there any public comments or correspondence to
Yes.
share? Bill?
That's true. And I came up with some information. The first sheet that you've got, this is relative to fire. This was a listing of line of duty deaths for the months of June and May. I used to provide these to Randy, but I've got the month, the agency, the age, male or female, and then the cause. The number of COVID deaths has declined, but there are two common ones that show up. One is cardiac cases, and the other is an increasing number of vehicle crashes. And the motor vehicle crashes seem to be divided evenly between full-time departments and volunteers. And with the volunteers, it's either responding to a fire or it's somebody driving a fire department vehicle, frequently tankers, that get involved in a crash. And you notice in May, there was one in New Haven, Connecticut, which was a Mayday call, and a firefighter did not survive that. The second one you should have, this is from Government Fleet website. That's an article about departments which are testing Tesla vehicles for police use. And there's some interesting information there. I think Eden Prairie in Twin Cities being the closest one. Surprisingly, NYPD has gone that route as a test. And there were two agencies here that actually had Teslas donated to. And the stats that I've seen indicates that there is some, they're looking at these because there's some really large cost savings in terms of maintenance. And the other one, not that it particularly affects us, but on the Police Magazine website, they did have bios for the finalists for the Austin, Texas Chief of Police, and it's just interesting looking at some of the backgrounds these people are bringing. And these people have some really extensive backgrounds. And also they've got on the list, there are 4 female candidates out of the 7, which is quite impressive. And that's all that I've got.
Okay, thank you. Just a good review. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Any other comments or correspondence? We need the approval of the minutes for the July 21st regular meeting.
Move to approve.
Second.
By Pinker, second by Earl. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of fire department bills. Chief.
Good morning. You have 2 sets of bills in front of you. One set of bills was reviewed and approved by Commissioner Myers on July 21st, and the second one by Commissioner Earl on August 4th. In reviewing the bills, I didn't really see anything of great interest, out of the ordinary, non-budgeted things. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions and ask for your approval.
One question, what's the current status on the work Merkel's been doing?
The door open? So after we had the floor done and striped, we started having issues with the door openers. Merkel was in here, troubleshooted everything. It came down to the striping that we bought. The reflective striping was causing the sun to hit that, bounce back, and prevent the doors from working.
Really?
Yeah, so what we ended up doing was cutting about 6 feet of that new striping off, putting on the old style striping, and haven't had a problem since. So,
Really?
yeah. And that was caught just by dumb luck, actually.
Oh,
But other than that, they are good.
Okay.
any other questions or comments on the bills for the fire department? Roll call, please. Oh, I need a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Thank you. Second.
Pinker, Earl,
Yes.
Myers.
Yes. Thank you, Chief. Approval of the police department bills, Chief.
Morning. In front of you, you have two sets of bills, one approved by Commissioner Panker on the 21st of July, and the second approved by Commissioner Myers on the 5th of August. Not much caught my eye, similar to the fire department this month, other than you'll note on 6E, we did spend $5,319. That is part of an overall strikers bill, and that was for 5 vest replacements for patrol officers. The interesting part about that is with that amount, typically about approximately half of that is covered by a state grant that we receive later in the year. So that's really the only thing of note. Other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions and would look for your approval.
Got a question for you, Chief.
Yeah.
There was one parts body repair for the F-150 that seemed to be a substantial amount.
That was in reference to the pit maneuver on the pursuit that we had on
Okay.
Veterans Parkway.
Okay,
And actually, that bill ended up coming in a bit lower than that, so.
okay. And then there was one for R&R flooring for floor replacement.
Floor replacement?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a small section down in the men's locker room in the shower that had to be replaced, and actually there was water that was leaking out of that shower.
It was like ceramic tile?
Ceramics, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions on the police department bills? I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion approved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Fire department activities, training reports, and correspondence. Chief Owen.
So I'll start out with just a quick COVID update. As of right now, we are pretty much back to normal. Last night at council, the council authorized Administrator Bard the power, if you will, to enact measures necessary in the event that the second strain starts to increase and cause more issues, up to, but not including mandating vaccinations. I think it's both our intent and the PD's intent, similar to the masks before, to follow city to stay in line with them, as long as there's no objection by the commission. Last month, several ride-alongs with a student from NTC, a paramedic student. A few public education events. We're starting to get back out there, starting to interact more and more. There were 2 or 3 events at Wenzel Plaza, as well as Hub City Days that we attended. Shifts conducted training again on the South Building before it comes down sometime in September. And we received a nice thank you card for a transport that we did. Other than that, the statistics are in there. We did have the fire on West 4th Street on July 14th. That property loss is in there. Again, it's all estimated, but total estimated fire loss for the month was $100,000. So with that, I think that's all I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions and ask that you accept and place on file.
I just have a couple of questions. On the activities on July 8th, the Emergency Operations Center meeting, what goes on there?
So the Emergency Operations Planning Committee meets typically monthly, and we discuss a lot of different things. Event preparation, such as the fair, Deputy Chief Letty and Deputy Chief Lucarelli worked together to put the incident action plan together for the fair. We talk about annual drill that the city does related to some type of large-scale incident, emergency services functions, kind of the policies, procedures are reviewed. Some training happens, and our next meeting is actually tomorrow. And we have the Canadian National Dangerous Goods Officer coming in to do some training on rail emergencies.
What time is that meeting?
9 o'clock tomorrow in here. Yep.
I might come.
Yep, definitely. So that's happening tomorrow. Should be pretty good. The DGO, the Dangerous Goods Officer, usually does a really good job on these classes. So that's kind of what happens at those meetings. They're attended by a lot of different individuals from both city and private entities.
Okay, 9 a.m. tomorrow. Okay, then going on the 28th, notification about Deputy Chief Letty attending the development review team.
Yes.
I'm on the Plan Commission, and a couple months ago we had an issue with a proposed development up in Manville, and I had some concerns, and I know Deputy Chief had expressed those same concerns to the development review team, and I know I appreciated his backup on my concerns, and I certainly hope my concerns back up for Chief. And the last item, this is on EMS Intercepts. Is there any pattern to these? Like, with whom are we intercepting? Is this local? Is this from long distance out? I know from listening to the radio transmissions, there seem to be a lot from Clark County.
Yeah, if it's, I would say Central Fire, Owen Withy, Loyal, Neilsville are our primary ones that we intercept with quite regularly. We do get an Edgar, Greenwood periodically, Pittsville once in a while. But if you would like, every month I do a statistical review of the previous month, and it's all in preparation for the annual report. So when I'm ready to do the annual, all I have to do is copy a number. I don't have to search everything. I have actually those listed out by agency that I certainly could include next month if you would like.
Oh, yes, please.
Sure, not a problem.
Because I know it seems that Central Fire and OW are calling you guys all the time.
Yeah, yep, they're between them and Neilsville, those are our primary intercepts.
That's it.
Okay, I've got one question. Did we determine the cause for that fire on 4th Street? That you can share?
That's been done. It's still being reviewed actually by us, but should be released shortly.
Okay, just hadn't heard anything yet. Okay, if there aren't any other questions or comments, we'll place those on file. Thank you.
Thank you.
Change in ordinance number 6-31, outdoor fires.
Right, I'll start. So recently there have been some issues and discussions surrounding outdoor fires, primarily camping fires in backyards and in city parks and stuff like that. When Deputy Chief Letty moved in his position, he realized that the ordinances in Chapter 6 need updating, and this is kind of the start of that process. He has been working on this along with Dennis from PD and the city attorney, and I'm going to have him actually go over the changes because this is really his baby, and I think these changes will make it much more clear for everyone.
Yeah, so the reason we started with this one first is I think it was kind of born out of a few different agencies having issues with this, such as the Parks Department. I know the police departments responded to a few unattended fires, and we didn't have any language in the code, specifically related to unattended fires. So I can go through the changes with you if you'd like. I can explain the rationale for changing those. Specifically under item 4, you should all have a copy of this. We changed the word shall to may. It's been pretty much standard operating procedure since I've been here that we don't necessarily make somebody put out a legal fire. If their fire pit is legal, it's not emitting a lot of smoke and it's not bothering neighbors. Smoke is going straight up in the air. We've typically allowed them to continue with the recreational fire. So we kind of changed language to what we have been doing for a long time. Just change that word from shall to may. Extinguishments can be left up to the also added language. An extinguisher is going to be left up to the either the police officer or the firefighter on scene. After that, we added in line 10. Again, this was pretty much born out of we've seen an increased use of portable fire pits in our city parks. I had discussions with Justin Casperson and Ben Steinbach regarding this, and they were not comfortable with burning at the city parks. A lot of it, part of it is due to what do they do with the coals and embers after the fire, they're done with their fire. I mean, leave them there? Do they, spread them in the woods? How do you get rid of those? So we didn't want to have any issues at our city parks. So line 10 there is for that purpose. 11, again, this addresses the concern of unattended fires. We had several incidents where people were having campfires in their yards, and they'd just go inside and either let it burn out or go inside and watch TV. I don't know what they were doing for a while, but you get a complaint, respond to the scene, there's nobody around a burning fire in their yard. So obviously that's not very safe. So item 11 addresses those issues. And then we move into items 12, 12.1, and 12.2. Basically what this does is allows us to issue citations. There was nothing in our code for repeat offenders, I guess, of this ordinance or anything like that. Basically, we'd show up, ask them to put out the fire, and there are times where we get a call back from the neighbor who complained, and they're stating they're burning again. So this actually just gives this ordinance means of stopping illegal fires, such as a legal fire pit or high amounts of smoke or burning vegetation or whatever. So that's pretty much what drove these changes, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. I also ask for your approval.
Item 12, is there any thought given to having an increasing forfeiture schedule, or are the number of incidents so small that we generally don't go beyond a second violation?
I actually spoke with Officer Salchinski on this, asking his expertise, and this is what his recommendation was. And I think after a couple of offenses, I don't believe we ever had issues after that. So,
PD, have any input on what's been do? Okay. You're more than welcome to share it if you.
No, just that we had some unattended fires that we got called on, and we're looking at statutes as it relates to what it could be. Where there was actual flames after a person had gone in for the night, and that it started up again. They didn't extinguish it well enough. I'm concerned about that, and we determined that that there wasn't a kind of intermediary offense between negligent handling of burning materials, which is a misdemeanor, which would probably require that something bad happen let the fire get outside the pit or something along those lines. And to try to address it at the lower level, like an ordinance citation level. And so this satisfies that element.
If I might add to, Mike, is that a lot of this code language is driven by DNR, verbatim almost. We did curtail it a little bit to our ordinance language, but this wasn't just drafted, willy-nilly or whatever. It was researched and put together, so. And city attorney also did review it.
Okay. Are there any comments from the commission? Will the proper procedure be to recommend a change to the ordinance that would be through the council?
Yeah, so this, upon your approval, this will be placed on the agenda for the next common council meeting as a first reading, and then a second reading at the next council meeting after that.
Okay, so the proper motion would be to recommend to the city council the change in ordinance number 631 regarding outdoor fires is recommended. Okay, I have a motion. Okay, motion, second. Are there any other questions or comments? Anybody? Roll call, please.
Pinker,
Yes.
Earl,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes. Thank you. A lot of work on that. Let us know if you get somebody that's got like 8 or 9. Have to make it a felony. These are the open, like on the ground kind of wood fires that, as it says outside of, for anybody that's watching, outside of a manufactured fire, even those fire pits, I suppose. Can't imagine. The comment or the complaints that you get, do they come from
Mostly
neighbors or?
Yeah, mostly neighbors, yeah.
Okay.
We might get a few that will call dispatch, and dispatch will give us a phone call. I mean, we're responding non-emergent to these incidents and with a station car, but yeah, most of them are driven by neighbors and passerbys.
Okay, thank you. We got some policies to begin a review on and our updates. Chief, or
Yeah. So last month, we discussed the kind of the procedure and way that we're going to bring new policies, the updated policies to this body for, excuse me, review and approval. This month we have 5 policies: organizational structure, department directives, liability, electronic, and administrative communications. One of the things that we found as we started updating some of these policies, such as 200 organizational structure, is a lot of the content that we currently have is spread out through several different policies. And so this current organizational structure is tied to 102.1 general rules, but you're going to see different sections of 102.1 in other policies down the road. Anyway, organizational structure, this is an updated policy. Really not too much new in there from current policy. Some clarifications, some minor updates from Lexipol. Otherwise, everything that they included within that policy is pretty much what we're doing already. 201 is department directives. We've never had a policy on special orders or department directives. They recommend that we have one, and this policy will allow us to officially do this. Since I've been chief, the only department directives that we've issued started last year with COVID, when we had to set stuff up immediately. So that policy will allow us to do that. And I do believe in that policy. I have that, you know, as directives are handed to departments, they would be copied into the commission as well so that you guys are aware of it. 202 liability claims. Our current policy, 202.3 property damage complaints, is exactly the same as the liability claim policy. We just retitled it and put Lexipol's verbiage on a few things. Otherwise, that's a verbatim policy. The next one, 203 electronic mail. We never had an email policy. We referenced email in the social media policy, I believe, and also references city policy. But this one here is a policy, again, that Lexipol recommends. The Lexipol recommended policies are ones that can get departments in trouble. It's things that, you know, people do that they don't think of. This one here was also sent up to IT, and it's consistent with city policy. And the last one, administrative communications, is simply an update to our current correspondence policy. It's a verbatim policy that just changes over the format to Lexipol with minor changes. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on any policy and ask for your approval.
Okay, Scott, on the organizational chart on page 9A-2,
Yes.
how would that change if we get a second fire station?
What you would probably see is another level of command. So you might see like commission, myself, underneath me would be maybe like assistant chiefs, and then the shifts would be you know, captains or battalion chiefs.
Okay.
So yeah, we would be able to spread out the administration portion a little bit more.
Okay, and then my understanding is correct, if we had a second station, you would not need a chief position at that station.
Correct. Yeah, captains can take care of it.
Okay.
Yep.
Then on page 9A-3, members of the Marshfield Fire and Rescue Department shall generally conduct department business through the established chain of command. I would assume this means in some case of emergency where you have to act immediately, the chain of command could potentially be bypassed.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Then on 9-A7, this is professional conduct and responsibilities. Members and officers shall conduct their private and professional lives in such a manner as to avoid bringing discredit to the department or the community. I am wondering here if this is too subjective a sentence, and whether this is reaching the point of being intrusive into a private life.
That particular one is current policy, and that will be updated in conduct and behavior in the new policy. And that's, I mean, that 102.1P has been in existence, well, since 97, and it pretty much has been the same ever since. But it's something we can definitely look at. And I haven't honestly looked at the conduct and behavior one of what Lexipol recommends.
Okay. Okay, fine. No questions.
Are you any questions? Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve fire department policies for the upgrade, policies 200 through 204.
I will move to approve the policies.
Second.
Second. Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Pinker,
Yes.
Earl,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Look forward to more.
Maybe you'll get them.
3 years. Item 10 is the hiring of firefighter paramedic for deployed firefighter. Chief?
Yeah, so similar to the request that we made in November of 2018, firefighter paramedic Anthony Halloran is being activated for military training. That training is slated to last 2 years. So with that, we're asking to refill his position so that we're not running short while he's gone. It's anticipated that there will be retirements within the next couple of years. And as I put in the memo, that we would work with HR in the event that that's not the case, we're +1. We'll work with HR to figure out the plan on how to bring us back to the 39 FTE. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions and ask for your approval to begin the process, because we'll have to start with interviews and everything else again, because we have nobody left on our list.
Any questions? Entertain a motion.
I have a question. In other words, you have no candidates at this point in time.
We have no candidates right now that are paramedic.
Wow. It's kind of scary.
It is. Actually, I talked with our consortium coordinator over at CVTC yesterday. I went on the CVTC website to see how many candidates we have, because we have a year-round process with them as well, and we have 0 candidates on our list. Fox Valley, we have a few more. So right now, I've been in touch with 6 individuals, 3 of which are interested in interviewing. So we've got a few, and provided school stays in session all year, we're hoping to start our school to work program with Tech College at the high schools to try and gain interest by students in the fire service.
How often do these schools graduate? Are these annual courses or
Yeah,
is it a one-year thing?
So typically, what we look at is associate degree, so a 2-year program. However, we've adjusted that to accept college credits and instead of a degree. Talking with Jeff yesterday at CVTC, they have like 67 people in their summer EMT class, and he inquired how many of those 67 are interested in full-time fire service, and 3 said maybe. A lot of them are using it for college credit. They're using it as a stepping stone to nursing, or some are going pre-med, some just want to do it for volunteer. So he was kind of dumbfounded as to why they're not. They had one individual in their Fire 1 class who had just started Fire 1 and talked with, this kid talked with Jeff, and Jeff asked him, what do you want to do with this degree? So that I want to get full-time fire. Jeff called the chief over at Chippewa, because that's where this kid wanted to work. Went in for an interview, just as EMT, and just started Fire 1, and they hired him on the spot because there's no candidates. So, and we're not the only one in the boat. I know, Point, Rapids, Wausau, we're all fighting for the same candidates, unfortunately. We're really hoping that this school of work, even if we have to make some modifications to the way we hire, as far as EMT or paramedic or whatever, we're hoping that this helps.
Thank you.
industry trend then, I suppose, then.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
How do you conduct a program through the tech school? Oh.
I don't know. I know, Mid-State started their associate degree program for fire a few years ago now, and they typically have a handful of students each year. I don't know how they can do it, but we're just not seeing the numbers of those interested. And I don't know if it's because people, are not interested in the harder work. They're not interested in public. If, by talking about all of our cancer prevention and everything, we've scared people away in industry-wide. Don't know, but I know, PD's in the same boat. They have limited applicants as well. It is frustrating. It's not like when all of us started and you'd go apply for a test and there were 120 candidates.
And you were just applying to get on a list.
Just to get on the list. But it's you interview and you pretty much, I pretty much tell Jen in HR, at the end of the interviews, let's offer this one before something happens.
I suppose if you could do it by going like this,
Yeah, if we could do remote control virtual firefighting, I think we'd have a line in the door.
well trained.
We do have, one vehicle that we can operate the stick by remote, so, I don't know.
Okay. We need a motion to hire a firefighter, paramedic for a deployed firefighter. Motion. Gordy, second by Bill. Any other questions or comments? Roll call, please.
Pinker,
Yes.
Earl,
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Police department here, oh yeah.
Yeah, they're here somewhere today.
Police department activities, chief.
All right, another typical round of trainings as those get ramped up in person, so people are happy to get back to those. It's very valuable for us. Typical gamut of meetings as well, so nothing really stuck out as far as that goes. Quick COVID update. I do agree with Chief Owen there. My plan would be to follow suit with the city because I do believe in consistency across the departments as far as any type of directive that might come down from City Administrator Barg. We have resumed ride-alongs. We've not currently done any tours to this point. We haven't had any requests for those. Most of the tours typically come in the spring when it comes to the schools. So as of right now, we're probably going to hold off on the tours, so we're confident that the Delta variant isn't going to be a problem in the community. So those are currently on hiatus. We'll reevaluate the ride-alongs as necessary. But with that, that's all I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and we'll look to have them placed on file.
As far as training that's being offered to members of the department, did that slack off a little bit because of COVID, or so it's ramping back up again?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say the vast bulk of training last year was virtual. There was very little in person. And I know we kind of touched on some of these things, the value of in-person training as it relates to, we just had an officer go get certified in EVOC, which is Emergency Vehicles Operations course. We had 110 firearms training. A lot of the networking, the things that comes from those interpersonal conversations really can't be beat. So it is a higher quality of training. With that being said, I think you're going to see some training moving forward that's going to stay virtual because we've come across some really good training groups that have offered some excellent online training that I've actually gone through myself. So I think you're going to see somewhere in between, but there's never going to be a substitute for some of the in-person training.
Any questions on the police department activities? Then we will receive those and place them on file. Thank you, Chief. And review and approval of the drone policy.
All right, you have in your packets the suggested unmanned aerial system drone operations policy. Who I have with here today is a man who needs no introduction, Lieutenant Dennis Kepper. Basically, his role is he headed up the drone team, and our team consists of, I believe, 4 officers now. you might have to correct me on that, that we have certified as drone pilots. So that was very important to us, that anybody who was gonna fly these things was certified. But what I'm really going to do is turn this particular policy over to Dennis to talk about and answer any questions on it.
So a lot of the discussion that we had as a group and with the district attorney and city attorney as it relates to this, and hopefully consistent with your review too, has to do with the main areas of concern or thought should be given to the privacy issues and providing this service and using this tool in a manner that allows us to do our jobs effectively and efficiently, but then also respects the privacy interests of the community too. And so there's lots of references to, not lots of, but a few references to areas where people have reasonable expectations of privacy and keying in on protecting those. But I would be interested in hearing any questions or thoughts that you guys have as it relates to that from an outsider's perspective in looking at this.
I have a question. Do you fly this drone when there's a problem with something, or do you just fly it around the community to see what's going on? Because I've got one that comes over my house about every other night, and I don't know what it's all about.
We've heard about that one over on over on the west side.
Yeah.
And the thought that you're having there too speaks to kind of the community concern as to them. It seems like an unknown, right? And what's this person looking at? Because you can't see from the ground where the camera is necessarily pointed or whatever, and whether or not they're intruding on an area that would be a reasonable expectation of privacy for you. That's a private person's drone.
Okay.
And you know, their individual right to do that kind of still exists as long as they're not you know, intruding on your expectation of privacy, coming in and obviously doing video on your fenced-in backyard or something like that. And it's very challenging to differentiate kind of that. So we have one of our prohibited uses, 606-6, is that it's prohibited to conduct random surveillance of private property where reasonable expectation of privacy exists. So it is not our intent to just go up and look for things, but it allows us a little bit of latitude to maybe go over an unpopulated park where we know that maybe drug transactions are going on or things like that, to see if something is happening there. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay.
That's what I thought this might be.
Yeah. No.
You tell me it's a private individual.
No, it's not. It's not. It's not us. You know, there are several private ones that we'll get calls on from time to time.
Okay.
And it's tough to not acknowledge that concern,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully that's reflected in here.
Yeah, the vision of this was never to substitute a set of patrol eyes.
Okay.
To just generally patrol the community with it. That was never the vision or intent of this.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you know, the primary purposes are up a little bit above that. Search and rescue type things. Locate someone that's on the run if in areas where they wouldn't have a reasonable expectation of privacy, and then to use it to prevent us from going into a dangerous situation where we could, kind of similar to the canine that allows us to probe certain situations, whatever, we may be able to do that with a drone also, so that a human being doesn't have to put themselves in a dangerous situation.
Makes sense.
What are the limitations for daytime, nighttime?
The nighttime, we've got 3 different drones, and the nighttime requires, one that the operator's been trained in nighttime operation. Then only one of our drones is okay to use at night because it has a light on it, and it needs to be able to be seen by other aircraft for, I think it's 3 miles. and that light does. So that exists. Visibility obviously is better during the day, but that one drone also has thermal capabilities, which is also a privacy type issue too, or can be a privacy type issue too, that we hopefully balanced in this. But we've got 2 smaller drones that are a little bit more maneuverable and can be better suited to daytime operation than two.
I think I had a conversation with one of the officers who was involved with the exercise where they were inside a school building or a building, and they were actually flying these things down the hallways and hovering above who was a victim or a culprit. Interesting.
Yeah, so that situation would be, I hate to get morbid at a meeting, but if there's a single person in a house and a gunshot, and we don't know if that person is suicidal or homicidal or both, or having a drone go into a building to assess that situation so that an officer can maintain a degree of safety is something that we've practiced at recent trainings. The team will have, of operators will meet 4 times a year to practice things like that, as well as other, we've used them multiple times now for dementia patients that have walked away from facilities, and things like that.
For any of you who are not overly familiar with them or haven't seen them in operation, by all means, reach out to us, and we'll give you. It's quite interesting to come out of your office in the hallway and see a drone floating down as they train with them. So it's a little, or as you're sitting in your office, one just kind of creeps down the hallway and looks in on you. It's pretty amazing what they can do, if used right. So by all means, if anybody's interested in that, reach out to Dennis or I, and we'll set that up for you.
Dennis, at the bottom of your first page, ensuring images and data are uploaded to evidence.com. This is a cloud service?
Yes.
Okay. What does that cost us?
I'm not sure, because that relates to the body cameras and the squad cameras.
Okay,
it's all the same program.
Okay, so it's a package more.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's also this program also allows us to, if you have a picture of damage that you reported that the officer can't see or whatever, that you already have the package, I can send you a link and you can upload it as a citizen to this program too once I send you the link. So it allows us.
So that was all part of the original Axon program with the mobile squads and the body cameras. So it's going into the same system.
So essentially, we're taking the outside sourced video potentially and uploading it there too, so that there's consistency.
Okay, so if one was actually looking at a film, you would see like you see on the Axons, your little logo at the top, Axon, such and such or not.
No, you would not, because the drones are not Axon proprietary.
Okay.
They would have their own settings.
How long do we have to retain those records?
I think it depends upon the circumstances. I think that those ones, and I think our recording policy is
It would fall under our records retention policy. I don't have that in front of me, but it is broken down by event, for instance, citations, warnings.
That's fine.
Yep.
So the recording of enforcement and investigative contacts. So search and rescue things may not be recorded. But enforcement and investigative contacts, just like when when we would have our body camera on, that's when we would have the drone camera on and recording.
Fine.
Try to make that consistent also.
Any other questions? Then I would entertain a motion to approve the UAS drone policy as recommended.
Move to approve the drone policy.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other questions? Roll call.
Pinker,
Yes.
Earl,
Yes.
Myers.
Yes, thank you. Get a handy tool. Let me take you up on the demonstration sometime.
I appreciate that.
I just followed that we've extended some thanks, but most of those drones came from community donations from last year. So just another shout out to the community for allowing us to get those.
I can understand why I was driving down the freeway one time down on the way to Madison. There was a trailer that had me with the sheriff's department drone unit. It was a,
It needed to be trailered.
boy,
You're a step up from us.
Yeah, we'll get there.
big trailer for, I pictured a drone. But I've seen what some of them that they have that was his name, Nick, has got that are just this big, coming a big, yeah, so cool. That kind of technology, yeah. It's very, very helpful for us. Well, thank you again. We have an addendum to our agenda, and that's the discussion regarding the need for services for special events and compensation for the same. Specifically, this comes about because of a particular comment or question by the Central Wisconsin State Fair Association. Either one of the chiefs, you've got have concerns about this and recommendations. We've been provided with the existing policies. Somebody want to take the lead on where we're at with, or where it came about and where we're headed?
I think where it came about was just came up a conversation as far as cost saving measure or an option for a cost saving measure on the fair board's part. For example, could they contract out a private security company, which would negate them basically, repaying us for our overtime services that we've been putting on down there. So you could get that at a cheaper cost. My recommendation at that point is I threw out some suggestions to say, there is a time and a place for private security, but they are going to be limited on what they can do for you. I really think that over the years, there's been a lot of pride taken in the fact that we have a very nice, safe fair in comparison to some others that I personally attended, and I said I would hate to lose that. But that being said, what I really wanted to make sure was there any type of liability incurred on the side of the department or the city if we didn't staff it to the extent that we had? Basically, if the fair says we would opt not to reimburse you for overtime, do we go back to a respond to calls as available or do walkthroughs as available, which I don't think anybody's overly comfortable with. But at the same time, I felt obligated to find an answer to that. So that question was then posed to City Attorney Wolfgram. He did render an opinion. Now the fire is going to be a bit different, as you'll hear. There's nothing in statute or ordinance that governs the amount of coverage that we put at an event. And we have charged for other events. So just kind of the final cap on that is we don't currently have a policy in Lexipol that deals with law enforcement chargebacks. But we did look and we found one from the old policy manual that was originally crafted in '98. And that one does deal specifically with law enforcement chargebacks. So I don't have the historical perspective on that. That would have come into play shortly after Joe Strike took the chief position. So when the Lexipol policy was imported, that policy was not anything that Lexipol addressed. That did not get in there. So one of the things that Attorney Wolfgram had brought up is that those types of chargebacks might be an issue, and I don't know that we have a definitive answer. That would need to come through the PFC, which I'm assuming it did if there was an approved policy at some point, and even to the council level, but I don't have an answer if that's how far it needs to go. So from where I'm sitting, my question would be the contemplation of reinstituting that chargeback policy into Lexipol and moving forward from that point. What that doesn't do is necessarily answer the question of, do we absorb the overtime and staff the fair as we have traditionally? Because I think that's a benefit to the citizens. Obviously, we want a safe event. And none of this really applies in my mind to this year. My plan this year, because it was just a conversation, no direct request was made by the fair board to do this, is to staff as we always have and make sure that we have the proper amount of officers down there. So that's really the short version of the police department's part of it.
And the fire side of it is very similar. We don't typically, staff the fair on standby type events for day-to-day operations. If they have an incident, we respond from here. We have our crews do walkthroughs. Our interaction with the fair related to costs comes when they have like the monster truck show and the demo derby. We have to supply an engine and an ambulance. And Chapter 6 of the code is pretty specific that if we determine that they need to have this, that they have to have it. So the policy that we have was approved. And like I had mentioned previously, my guess is our policy is almost verbatim to the PDs. So I don't know if at the time the two chiefs got together and said, this is our policy, let's send it, and it was approved. I can find chargebacks for different standbys back to 1985. And currently, when we staff an event, such as the demo derby, it's 3 people on an engine and 2 on an ambulance, so 5 overtime personnel. The question was raised by the fair director about using volunteer fire departments. And my interpretation of the code, and I believe as I read the city attorney's legalese on it, in his legal terms, that it's up to us if we decide that, we want to staff it or we're going to let a volunteer fire department staff it. That's how I interpret his rendition on it, correct?
That's
okay. So we're not looking for any change as far as staffing our events. I know that he would prefer to bring in a volunteer department because they'll be cheaper. And we've worked with the fair in the past. They are paid up to date. Over since 2013 is what we got records for. So they are paid up. They don't necessarily pay right away. We're kind of the last players to get paid, which is fine. It all comes in eventually. And I know Dale's biggest concern this year is, and every year, is money, especially since there was no fair last year. Revenues are down, so I'm not looking to make any changes to this year's fair. And I don't know if you have any. That's just the billing portion. We have another issue that we're dealing with right now related to vendors, food vendors specifically. There was a memo that was sent to the fair back late 2018 stating that they would have to have certain fire suppression systems in place in basically those food trucks by state statute. So they've had 3 years to get this finalized, and we're still getting pushback. They don't want to do it. You're not going to have food vendors at the fair because we're the only department that requires it, when in essence that's not true. One of the rules, specifically the hood systems, comes out of Wausau. It's considered the Wausau Rule. And there's special requirements. We had a meeting with Dale. We told him about these, that they need to comply, and he keeps coming back that we're the only ones. We keep telling him no. I got asked the question last night by an alderman about these systems, and we're going to schedule a meeting with that alderman and Dale at the fair and further explain this. Pete is the expert on this.
This is NFPA 96 right here. This regulates all cooking equipment. So, and really it boils down to one line here in chapter 4.1.9 specifically says cooking equipment used in fixed, mobile, or temporary concessions such as trucks, buses, trailers, pavilions, tents, or any form of roofed enclosure shall comply with this standard. What this standard says is that if you're cooking anything with grease-laden vapors or smoke, that you need a hood system and a fire suppression system. And again, we've been trying to historically we haven't enforced that at the fair. I think that opens us up to liability and other issues. I don't think it's safe for our fair goers or the food vendors. So I've been slowly trying to introduce this for the past 2 years now. I've sent letters to Mackey, Main Street, Marshfield, to the fair board, saying, hey, we're going to start this in 2020, January 2020. I was going to give them a year. COVID hit, realized it's a tough year. We're going to start it in 2021, January 2021. So I think we've given plenty of notice for these people to comply with the code. And I'm really struggling with the pushback because I think we've been more than fair with this. And I just want to see a safe fair. I think, again, if something happens, and I mentioned this to the fair director, that if something happens and somebody gets hurt, this is going to be investigated by the DCI up in Madison. They're going to come up, they're going to do their investigation. And if there isn't a fire suppression system in there, and that was the cause of the fire, first question that's going to be asked of us is, why did you enforce this code? So I try not to be overbearing with this. It's just what it is. It's the code. But I really think we should be following it. The state statute, and Scott referred to this, the Wausau Rule, does allow for some exceptions. It's SPS 314.5. And I think this, applies more to the fair type situation where, if a food vendor meets all three of these conditions, the kitchen is less than 365 square feet in size, the kitchen is used fewer than 12 days in a calendar year for the purpose of cooking, and the owner or operator of the kitchen maintains a record demonstrating compliance with sub 2, retains the record with the kitchen, and makes the record available to the inspector upon request, that they don't need the hood and fire suppression system. So that's the Wausau Rule in a nutshell. So if they meet all those requirements laid out in SPS 314.5, then they don't need it. But if they cook greater than 12 days in a year, or the kitchen is greater than 365 square feet in size, they need to follow Nfpa 96.
So the mom and pop French fry stand, 360 square feet is,
They're fine if they cook less than 12 days in a calendar year, yes.
And not under a tent.
But if they're doing the entire fair circuit, they have to follow, they're supposed to follow Nfpa 96.
it's not specific to a particular community, it's in a given year.
Yeah, so this directive is, we follow, the code we use is driven by state statute, so that falls under this, and that's the code we're to enforce.
And this question was posed to our state representative out of DSPS, and she basically said, no, you gotta follow the code. It's, if there are agencies out there that aren't enforcing it, we have no control over that. You look at other fairs that maybe have these issues, you have to look at who was inspecting and, and what they're doing. But for us, we're attempting to follow the code as much as we can on everything. And I think that, the decision for this year of enforcing this or not enforcing this year come down to this body about what you want. You know, our preference is to enforce it on the fire side. You know, and the alderman last night said, well, you know, you enforce it, you'll have 3 vendors. You can't have a fair with 3 vendors. You know, we look at, just like the police, doing a safe event. Luckily, we haven't had an issue in the past. But, you know, I mean, 2 years ago, we had, and again, discussions with the fair director. We had a high dive act that they set the diver on fire and he dove into the water. You can't have that. That's something that we don't allow. We told him. He told the performer that, and they totally ignored it. Did it a second time, and that's when we went down and said, no, absolutely not. And this is kind of the same thing. You know, we've told them over and over, but I know the alderman last night said he had never seen the letter, so I don't know if the fair board is not sending, or the fair office is not sending it out. I have to believe that Angie.
Ashley
Ashley did send it out previously, but I don't know, you know, where we're kind of sitting. But so that's part 2 of our issue. Part 1 being the billing. We plan on going status quo with what we're doing. So
yeah, our problem is when we go down and do these inspections, we inspect all food vendors just prior to the fair opening. And I explained to Dale that, you know, our intent was to start enforcing this code. But I don't want to put our inspectors in the position of arguing with the food vendor, that we were gonna either red tag or green tag the vendor, and we report back to Dale, and it was Dale's responsibility to the fair.
Which could potentially bring us into the fold if there's an argument between the fire department and the vendor. So it's all kind of cyclical, and I don't feel comfortable because I would anticipate a decent crowd. I think people are ready to get out unless something changes here in the next couple of weeks. But you know, I remember years past, your private security serves a function. They're very similar to our auxiliary. They're an extra set of eyes and ears in our presence that might deter some things. But ultimately, unless they're going to escort a cooperative person off the grounds, that's about the extent of what type of action they can take. You really lose the value of a police officer down there if you start to reduce those numbers. I do attribute that to why the fair is the event that it is, because we have officers down there that are very diligent and looking for problems, looking for people who might have warrants, looking for groups of individuals that historically may have sat by the exhibit building and intimidated others. So there's a reason why it is what it is. And I don't, you know, my interactions with Dale were not negative. I mean, I think he was posing a question, and I think it was constructive. You know, what can I get? You know, is there a better way to do this? Can I do this if I want to? And then we countered with, here's what you could be looking at, here's what you might be losing. There wasn't anything, you know, negative with what he was saying. I think he was probing for information on the best, you know, how to be fiscally responsible was fair, but at the same time, our obligation is to make sure that it's the safest, most enjoyable event for the community that we can. So I would not feel comfortable running a shift of 6 and a CO, which would be a fully staffed shift on the evening of the fair without paying some semblance of overtime to make sure I had people available if something happened down there and then something happens out in the community that we also need to respond to. So.
Well, and the immediate accessibility when you need something, I mean, to buck the crowds and the traffic to get there, to supplement the rent-a-cop, being on site and being able to react to it.
Challenging it
have
on itself.
access to it. Well, it appears we got a couple issues here. One, the billing, and I don't have any problem myself having you continue to bill for the costs that are incurred by what you feel is reasonable on coverage by your individual departments. And the fallback is, you know, not saying that they will, but personalities change, people change in the makeup of the board. And if they were to refuse to pay, then at least we've got the city policy that says no license will be issued without if you owe the city money, so you got something to fall back on for enforcement there. The other issue would be the enforcement of code, of state code, federal. I think that has to be fine-tuned a little bit before we start stopping. I mean, I would like to see if there's a possibility of something on the lines of the Wausau one, where, and then interpretation of that too. The question I have again, I asked about 12 days in a given year. Now, is that 12 days in a given year in general terms, or is that specific to the community? Like, are they gonna be active more than 12 days in a year in Wausau? Or is it in a broader sense?
And I did ask that question to DSPS because I had the same question as you, and it's 12 days in a calendar year for that vendor. So it can be anywhere in the state.
Okay. That's something I think we gotta look at. If it's up to this body to make a decision, I don't think we're prepared to do that today. And I think if we, I don't know, a little hesitant to just to status quo for now until we can put something down, give it some teeth that you can walk in and say, this is our policy tool, which you don't have right now. It's just, you have that policy, but I don't know how you feel about that. I don't even want to enforce it the way it is, but I think for the community, and I can't see where you get a whole lot of vendors to bite if they had to meet those requirements. And half of going to the fair is eating all the junk food. So.
Yeah. And I guess the thing I struggle with too is for those that do comply with Nfpa 96.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not really fair to them.
Yeah.
And I struggle with that part of it as well, so.
Well, what is your, I guess just to throw this out there, because it does pertain to both of our departments. What liability do you believe you incur if you intentionally overlook a state statute? Because we ask ourselves that all the time. There's a certain level of discretion that we have, but we operate under, are we in a defendable position if a fire were to break out? And I think, and I'm just throwing this out there, is how you're going to have to look at it, is risk versus reward. And that would be how that would be my suggestion to you on how to look at it, is, are you putting yourself in a defendable position if you proceed status quo and don't?
Right, I think I tried to touch on that a little bit, that if a fire were to break out, an investigation is going to happen because anything over $500 has to be investigated. And, if the cause is due to, a fire in a kitchen that didn't have a proper extinguishing system, I don't think, and we inspected it, I don't think we're in a very defendable position at all. I think our backs are against the wall right there. We did follow Nfpa 96, which is pushed out by the state of Wisconsin for us to follow as inspectors. And we're not in a very defensible position at all. So.
Any other commissioners have some input on this, or questions or comments?
Okay, just taking my 2 cents worth on this. I firmly believe both departments must charge for any overtime that's occurred. Second, the fire department, because of the life safety issue that's involved here, the fire department must enforce the applicable local or state codes. No question. If that means we have 2 vendors at the fair, because we have 5 that are not complying, I guess we have 2 vendors. I'm not willing to risk what Pete is saying, having DCI come in, possibly OSHA, and saying, hey, look, you guys caused the problem because you didn't enforce it. I'm also concerned with the food vendors, whether it's a truck, whether it's a kiosk, a tent, whatever. We've got flammables, we've got compressed liquefied gases, we're close proximity to the public. This all is extremely hazardous. My view, if it's on the books right now, we enforce it. If that means we have to red tag places, I guess we red tag them.
Bill?
Just if I could throw one more comment out there, I don't know if you've ever seen a grease fire going, but they are quite violent, burn very quickly. Without that, that's why the extinguishing system is supposed to be in place, is to knock that down immediately before it can spread to, other flammables around. So that's the whole purpose of this code, is to stop that. So.
I guess, when you look at other fairs, and this is not a 100% for sure, it's a possibility. Those that don't enforce it, maybe they have their fire departments standing on site. They're always there. They house the engine. I know, like at the big state fair, the fire department is there, on site. EMS is there on site. Now, granted, you're getting thousands of people a day, but they can quickly mitigate something. We don't stand by there, and by the time we would be able to make our way through the crowds to get, we would easily have 2 or 3 food trucks, food vendors up in flames. With the potential, depending on which one, spreading to the grandstand or ground barn or whatever. So that may be a difference, and codes are enacted because something bad happened somewhere, and that's why we have codes for anything and everything, from exit lights and doors to suppression systems.
It's interesting that it's been brought up at this point. I can't remember the date. It was either in June or July in the past. There was a service fire in I think it was in Hartford, Connecticut, where a service tent burned up. It's like 165 people or so died. Fairs, whether it's in the past or whether it's now, are not noteworthy for being fire resistant and fireproof.
So stands as they are now, and I'm just not picking the two, only that they're more permanent, would be the ones on both ends of the grandstand. Do they comply with this specifically?
Not. Unless they meet the exceptions set forth in SPS 314.50, which I actually had to talk with Scott, and I had to talk this morning. We're not sure that they cook more than 12 days in a calendar year.
Okay.
Yeah, the other one, from my understanding through our discussions with Dale, is not being used this year. It's going to be a sitting area.
Okay.
Yeah, the Euro stand that always occupied that is going to bring in their own mobile truck this year, so that part will be sitting.
And they are apparently going to have a food vendor down the midway out by the curling club building this year. So again, it's, just additional exposures.
So the policy you keep referring to, is that give an exception for so many particular days,
Correct, yeah, so,
like what Wausau one does?
yeah, so that's exactly what I'm referencing. So that SPS 314.50 is the
That's
Wausau
12.
Rule. Yeah, so that's written in state statute. And as long as, like I said, if we measure their kitchen, which I can't see their kitchen being 365 square feet in size. If they use the kitchen fewer than 12 days in a calendar year, so if it's just for the state fair, they're gonna be fine. And as long as they provide us a record on our request of the days they're using the kitchen for cooking, they don't have to follow this policy or this standard.
Well, it seems to be the consensus, at least the commission to enforce it. That leaves it up to you to go ahead and enforce it. But I do think we gotta get something down in black and white. A policy per se to deal with this directly. If it just says follow the guidelines or the regulations that you quoted a couple times. So we have something that Ann and Dale or whoever's in, whatever vendor comes forward.
And this, I mean, during Pete's revision of chapter 6, we could certainly incorporate language into there, referencing 314, not specific 314 point whatever, just because that changes periodically, but 314 is the fire prevention statute.
And Scott, again, when did you start discussing this with the fair?
Late 18, it was after the fair in 18.
I want to say, I sent the initial letter in December of 2018 stating that they had a year to assure that all food vendors complied with this standard. And again, 2020 hit, and I think in April I revised that to say, okay, January 1st, 2021, we're going to start to compliance with this, because understanding that people were struggling during that time, they may not be able to afford a hood system and a fire suppression system. So
They've known about this for 3 years.
yes.
Okay. Is there any further discussion?
I guess just on the police department side, I'll look through the policy manual to see if there's a current policy where that might fit, or create a new one if we need to, and then I don't have a time frame for you, but move that forward for your approval if you think that that's necessary. I think it is, just given the question that's come up as far as the chargebacks.
Yeah. That brings up another point in regards to policies. When we're updating the policies, do they give you a list of policies that weren't addressed or weren't updated? Like this one kind of slipped.
It didn't, and I think where that came from is when we went through the Lexipol policy manual, there may have been ones we missed that we currently had that Lexipol didn't address. So as those come up, I think this is really the first one I've ever seen like this, where there was a true policy in the other manual that this one doesn't seem to address at all. So
I think for us, that we're doing the updating to the policies. We're actually taking our current and updating. So as I go through our current policy manual, the online copy that they provide us that's all highlighted, I cross out things so I know what's done and other things, hoping not to miss different things. And when we're all said and done, we'll go page by page through the old manual just to make sure everything is crossed out, and then that'll be the final manual.
and I guess the only other thing I could add is there is some gray opinion on the city attorney on where or if the council plays a role in this, being that it is collected money that would go into, but I would assume their general fund. I don't have an answer for you, but that is, if you read that way, there is that question out there that Attorney Wolfgram said he was going to be researching with Administrator Bard a little bit to see if they play any role in that. Which I'm assuming has not happened, because once the policy was enacted back in 1998, I'm assuming that's how we roll. So
The days are gone where they just provide the service and didn't collect any money for us. They have free tickets for the fair and the whole department and the utility and everybody else.
Everybody.
Those days are gone. Gee,
I just have one last comment. I apologize for springing this whole cooking thing on you guys on the last minute here, right before the fair. I thought we were clear by sending those letters to the fair. Apparently we were not. Learned that at our last meeting, which was last week, was it?
Yep.
That it was not clear, that they didn't seem to be intent to follow that. So again, apologize for springing it on in the last second, but thank you.
does the commission feel they need to make a motion on this to back up the department enforcement, or is it, does it suffice to say that we would expect them to enforce the law that's written? So to the,
It would be my expectation that the ordinances and statutes and codes would be enforced.
okay. So we don't have to make any, basically it's a consensus, so. All right. Any other questions or comments on any other issues? Seeing none, I adjourn this meeting. Okay, I appreciate everybody's input and assistance.
Thank you.